I feel a rant coming on, and I'm just gonna go with it. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna go with it. 6 years into my sustainability journey, I'm definitely older now and a little bit wiser. So I wanted to talk about which unhinged zero waste habits I'm leaving in 2023. And I promise you, if you take a moment to think about which sustainable habits aren't working for you, you will be a better earth person overall. You'll have more time, more energy, and more money to focus on the things that actually matter. So let's dish. Habit number 1, DIYing with essential oils. Maybe it's just because I'm not accidentally hanging out in the crunchy corner of Instagram anymore, or if the zero waste movement has wised up a bit. But in my day, everyone who considered themselves sustainable DIY'd every sort of personal care and household cleaning product imaginable. And boy am I glad to be giving that era the kibosh, because what did most of these DIYs have in common? Essential oils. The idea is essential oils are natural and therefore safer and more eco-friendly than synthetic chemical fragrances found in conventional products. Well, there are many things wrong with this line of thinking. Number 1, to say that natural equals safer is what's known as the appeal to nature fallacy. It's a mistaken logic that occurs when something is claimed to be good because it's perceived as natural, and likewise when something is claimed to be bad because it's made in a lab or chemical. But you don't have to be a rocket surgeon to understand that this isn't always the case. Bears are very natural, but despite being friend-shaped, they're incredibly dangerous. Mercury is a naturally occurring element, but watch out, it's coming to get ya. And plenty of man-made substances are deadly AF, but not just because they were man-made. Whether something is natural or synthesized in a lab tells us precisely nothing about its safety or sustainability. And the same is true with fragrance. In fact, I'm just gonna check my notes. 1 second. Ah yes. Essential oils are perhaps more likely to cause allergic reaction than synthetic fragrances, can cause burns and irritation if applied to the skin, even when diluted, and especially in sensitive areas such as mouth, eyes, nose, and bathing suit areas, as I heard one board-certified dermatologist refer to certain parts. They're toxic in small amounts if ingested. Certain ones can cause phototoxicity, can be especially harmful to pets, particularly cats, can cause disruption to the endocrine system, which is ironic because I thought hormone disruption was the reason influencers tell us to avoid synthetic fragrances. But to be honest, it's not the question of safety that has deterred me from using them. Because to be fair, essential oils are generally safe when used properly, just like synthetic fragrances. I only bring up the safety concerns to raise awareness because I think a lot of casual users of essential oils take their safety for granted since they're natural. But for me, it's a question of sustainability. You want to talk about zero waste? There is nothing zero waste about the essential oil industry. Those teeny tiny vials are incredibly resource intensive to produce. For instance, it takes 10,000 pounds of rose petals to distill 1 pound of essential oil. Wild. And one of the less impactful essential oils, lemon, it takes 75 lemons to make one 15 milliliter bottle of EO. But at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, is what I'm using to be more eco-friendly actually causing me to be less eco-friendly? And in general, I DIY a lot less these days because I don't necessarily find homemade products to be less impactful or even less physically wasteful. Let me know in the comments if you'd like a video about which DIYs I still do and which ones I don't. That last habit was a great segue into habit number 2, relying on zero waste remedies for health issues. So I've mentioned this before because it still makes me cringe with shame, but I used to make my own toothpaste. Back then, the only zero waste toothpaste you could get was David's, which was too rich for my blood. Couldn't afford it. So making my own toothpaste was my first foray into trying to treat/prevent health issues with zero waste remedies, solutions, what have you. I used it for a few weeks or months, but it was pretty nasty, probably bacteria laden, I'd guess. And the properly diluted peppermint essential oil burned our gums. And of course it didn't have fluoride, which I quickly found out I desperately needed, like when room temp water is hurting your teeth because you were trying to prevent some plastic waste.
You know you're unhinged.
So I switched to tooth tabs, which started popping up all over the place with fluoride, amazing. But I hated the texture. I think it's the ADHD or something, but I dreaded brushing my teeth. Until I heard about this company called Hey Humans that made a fluoride toothpaste in recyclable aluminum packaging, and it was like $4 or something. I was in love, but mysteriously, it started becoming harder to find. Story of my life. And eventually, Hey Humans disappeared altogether, so I thought I had no other choice but to go back to tooth tabs. I guess at this point I started becoming more used to them, not hating the texture as much, but they were expensive. And just a few weeks ago, Get to Marry published a video kind of questioning and examining the sustainability of tooth tabs, so I definitely recommend watching that after this. But the fact is, I don't know if the ones I was buying are more eco-friendly or not, because it's really hard to know that unless you have the life cycle assessment of the particular brand. So I'm back on regular toothpaste. Throwing those jokers away does have an impact, but health is not something to mess around with, and it's no guarantee that the zero waste options are more sustainable anyway. I no longer need to hold myself to this ridiculous standard where I'm forcing myself and my partner into risking our health just to save a little bit of plastic.
It's stupid.
And this applies to other things too, like acne products, dandruff shampoo, allergy medicine, contraceptives, contact lenses, or whatever. And how can I not talk about sunscreen here? I don't know who needs to hear this, but your sunscreen does not need to be zero waste. If you've ever shopped for a zero waste sunscreen, you'll know 100% of them are mineral sunscreens. And this might make you feel great to spend that extra money on, because most of the time they're marketed as not only being safer to humans, but to coral reefs. But did you know that reef safe and reef friendly aren't regulated labels, and the claim that mineral sunscreens are better for the oceans than chemical sunscreens has been disproven? It's bad science and dishonest marketing, and newer studies have found that mineral sunscreen, aka inorganic sunscreen, harms coral reefs just as much as chemical sunscreen, aka organic sunscreen, which is basically not at all. So they're both fine, both safe, and the safest thing to do is to find one that you don't mind putting on just about every day, whether it's chemical or mineral. I put chemical in scare quotes because obviously the metal oxides in mineral sunscreen are chemicals too. And we all know chemical is a dirty word, which obviously makes people scared of certain ingredients, but I digress. This zero waste mineral one I have, I do like, but because of the thicker formula and the slight white cast, I find myself only wanting to wear it when I'm also putting on makeup, which is not very often. And I am just not okay with that anymore. So I'm going to switch to a chemical sunscreen, aka organic sunscreen, that goes on smoother, looks better on, something I want to wear every single day because I don't want to get cancer. So yeah, no longer jeopardizing my health just to get a merit badge from Bea Johnson. Which brings us to habit number 3, fear-mongering chemicals. Truth be told, I never really made much money being an eco content creator. I think the most I've ever made was like $5,000 a year. But by breaking this next habit I'm about to share with you, I pretty much guaranteed I would never make money again on any of my platforms. And that's supporting and promoting fear-based marketing and pseudoscience. It turns out not very many sustainable brands have proof that they're sustainable. So they have to rely on misleading marketing claims and buzzwords to sell their products. Greenwashing and cleanwashing, essentially. Think labels like clean or free from blank, free from parabens, free from fluoride. Then there's reef safe, all natural, earth friendly, non-GMO, things like that. And oh, my favorite, chemical free, because sure, that's a thing. Not, psych. All these labels are completely meaningless. And when I figured this out and started to speak out against it, the sponsorship opportunities pretty much dried up. I feel a rant coming on, and I'm just gonna go with it. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna go with it. For instance, if a brand uses the fact that the EWG has rated them as like verified in their database or whatever, I know not to be impressed by that and not to use those credentials to sell to my following. Because the EWG, or the Environmental Working Group, which is the organization behind a lot of this fear-mongering that we see on social media, is not a reliable source. The EWG is not a reliable source. It's a lobby for the organics industry, and many scientists I respect call it propaganda. Who isn't the EWG? An organization that reflects the opinions of the scientific community. If you haven't heard of the EWG before, I'm sure you have heard of the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 lists that come out every year. Well, the EWG is to thank for that pseudoscience. I don't have time in this particular video to go super in depth with all the baseless fear-mongering I see in the Sustainiverse every single day, but I did want to touch on the Dirty Dozen list because I feel like this is one of the most harmful concepts being spread right now, and it applies to many niches besides just zero waste. So the Dirty Dozen is a list of conventionally grown fruits and veggies that are deemed by the EWG as having high levels of pesticide residues. They don't conduct any studies themselves. All they do is take the USDA's data and reinterpret it without any of the context. AKA, they don't compare the levels of pesticides from conventional produce to organic produce. For some reason, the presence of organic pesticides don't matter to them. Oh wait, I know why. It's because of the fallacy that naturally derived pesticides are safer and better for the environment than conventional pesticides. But as we talked about earlier, this is not necessarily the case. Brands are aware of our bias toward natural ingredients and materials, and they're more than willing to exploit that, which has resulted in widespread chemophobia, or the unreasonable fear of synthetic substances. The EWG spends millions trying to make you think organic means chemical-free. The EWG also fails to mention that over 99% of the conventional produce tested is consistently far, far below safety thresholds, like hundreds to thousands of times lower. You could eat 453 servings of strawberries, which is 226 cups in a single day, even if the strawberries had the highest recorded pesticide levels in history before you experience symptoms of toxicity from the pesticide. Research has established that anti-science, pro-organic, fear-based messaging like this is partly to blame for 9 out of 10 Americans not getting adequate amounts of produce. And a survey published in Nutrition Today indicates that this particularly affects low-income shoppers who have been led to believe that it's healthier to skip the veggies altogether than it is to risk eating conventionally grown or processed veggies. And aside from the bogus safety claims, I also want to add here that many studies have found that certain organic farming practices are less eco-friendly than conventional, because here's something that's not really talked about ever. Not all organic methods are created equal, and blanket statements like
organic is better for the environment
or
organic pesticides are safer to ingest
are way too general to be accurate. So don't fall for this. Long story short, I don't help brands profit from this fear-mongering anymore, and I feel like what they're doing is basically profiting from the public's lack of scientific literacy. So businesses and organizations who spread unfounded fear in order to sell stuff, canceled. This next habit is the most unhinged of all, and it's believing everything I read about sustainability. It used to be that if I heard someone say something that I wanted to believe was true, that was it for me. It's fact. Nothing more to say. So when a zero waste influencer casually mentioned that Miyoko's plant-based butter wrappers are compostable, I composted them. Did I look on the website to make sure that was the case? Did I email the company? I did not. I went out of my way to buy the most expensive plant butter because I believed it to be compostable, aka more eco-friendly. I wanted to vote with my dollar, even though I had very few of them to vote with. But that was important to me. Apparently not important enough to fact check though, until quite recently. I'd been inundating my local compost service with non-compostable wrappers until I developed the good sense to check if this influencer did in fact know what she was talking about, which she didn't, but that's on me. See also, recycling tips from people who don't live in your area. Folks who say that gable-top milk cartons and Tetra Paks aren't recyclable, false. It depends what your facility accepts, and mine accepts those. In some municipalities, you can recycle tissue paper and aluminum foil and pizza boxes and glass, but in many others you can't. The key is to look into the guidelines where you live, and if someone says
something is or isn't recyclable,
take that with a grain of salt and look into it yourself. Personally, I have my town's recycling guide in easy reach on my Notion dashboard. Therefore, I no longer believe everything I read about sustainability on Al Gore's internet, and I'm much more careful with the information I process. If I find myself wanting to believe something without needing any extra proof, that is a red flag for me and gives me even more reason to look into it. Now, I am so curious to hear from you. Are there any unhinged zero waste habits you've given up? We need to know, so please Dish in the comments. But it can be hard to know which sustainable habits are actually moving the needle in a positive direction and which ones are doing more harm than good. So I definitely suggest watching this video next, where I myth bust some commonly held beliefs in the sustainability movement and talk about which research-backed eco habits we should all be committing ourselves to instead. Appreciate you so much for watching. And I also want to thank you for being open to changing your mind when you learn new information, because it's an exceptionally rare quality. So have a good one. Bye.